Welcome to Parts 2. Today we're going to be talking about navigating around. We're going to be entering coordinates with the keyboard and with the mouse. Basically, we're going to be going over the three different input methods. We have relative, absolute, and polar. And we're also going to be going over our snap icons. We have grid snap, object snap, marker snap, intersection snap, and free pick. We'll also be going over the rest of the icons at the top. But before we get into that, I would like to go over some keyboard shortcuts. And this kind of ties in with yesterday's class. Yesterday we talked about the edit and the draw menu. These shortcuts that I'm going to show you are, like I said, they're on your keyboard. But instead of having to go up to the main menu and selecting, you can just hit a key on your keyboard. So we're going to start at A and work our way through Z. So if you tap the letter A on your keyboard, that is going to allow you to draw a three-point arc. And if you look at the bottom of the screen, remember, anytime you select a function or an option in the program, doesn't necessarily have to be just under the edit or the draw menu. Look at the bottom of the screen and it's going to tell you exactly what you need to do. So all I need to do to draw a three-point arc, click my start point, click a point along the arc circumference, and then click the end point. Okay, I'll go ahead and put another one out here. B as in boy will allow you to group objects. It will actually, if you remember, under group, you have manual and box select. B will allow you to pull up the box select. It will allow you to draw a bounding box around objects, so then that way, when you go to drag them, they're going to be dragged as a group instead of independently. Here, let me clear the drawing area. C as in cat will allow you to draw a circle, so I've tapped the C key and it immediately brings up this circle dialog box. Remember, you can specify a diameter or radius. If you enter something in both fields, it's going to go with the first field or the diameter. If you leave these blank, we'll just say OK to that. It's going to allow you to eyeball or free pick the size and placement of your circle. Okay? D as in dog will allow you to drag objects. E is not used. G will allow you to gap an object. When gapping an object, select the object you want to gap. It's going to highlight the entire object. It's going to place a marker at each intersection point. Select the beginning marker and the end marker for gap, and then select which side you would like to gap away. J will allow you to place a lead-in line. We're actually going to talk about that in another class, so I will not cover that. K will allow you to draw a lead-in arc. Again, we're going to talk about that in a different class, so I'm not going to cover that. L will allow you to draw a line. Okay. M, as in monkey, will allow you to move an object. Remember, unlike drag, move is a very precise function. Let me clear the drawing area here. I'll place a small circle out here. I'll tap the M key. And then all I need to do is start typing on my keyboard. I want to move it 10 inches on my x-axis, and I want to go 2 inches up on my y. Okay, from this point right here, it's gone over 10 inches and up to, based off of the center point. O will allow you to data an object. Yesterday, let's see, I'd probably drawn a rectangle. I went to Data, Object, selected a line. It's going to give you the start and the end point. I'll talk about those start and end points later on today. but it's also giving you the length of the line and the angle. Okay, if you select a circle, it will tell you the coordinates of the center of the circle, gives you the diameter and the length of the circle. Let's clear the drawing. P will allow you to draw a polyline. Remember, polyline, the best description I can give, the start of the next line is the end of the previous line. Okay? So basically, you're going to keep on drawing this line infinitely until you go up to the top and click the green check or the Done button. Let's clear the drawing. R will allow you to draw a rectangle. I've tapped the R key, I get this rectangle dialog box. I can specify a width, a height, and an optional corner radius. Just like the circle, if I leave those blank and just OK the box, it's going to allow me to eyeball or free pick the size and the placement of the rectangles. S will allow you to set a group reference. I will talk about that later today. So I'm not going to show you right now, basically, is what I'm saying. T will allow you to trim or extend an object. Remember, when using the trim and extend function, first you need to decide which side of the line you want to trim or extend. If we decide the right side, we need to click closest to the end of the right. Okay, it's going to place a marker, and now depending on which side of the marker you select, it's either going to extend or trim. Okay, U, as in umbrella, is going to allow you to ungroup all. As you see, I placed a rectangle here. Now, you know when we drag a rectangle, it's going to be dragged as a group. I've hit the U as an umbrella key on my keyboard, and now when I go to drag the rectangle, it's only going to drag one line at a time because it is no longer grouped together. Let's clear the drawing. V, as in Victor, will allow you to review the cut path. We will talk about setting the cut path in another class. W will allow you to auto-cut. The computer figures out the cut path by itself without you having to say or tell it how to cut out the object. Again, we're going to go over that in a different class. The X will allow you to delete an object. Y will allow you to copy an object. It just does a single copy. And Z, as in zebra, will allow you to magnify. It's going to zoom in. Okay, that's basically it for the hotkeys. At least the A through Z hotkeys. We'll have. Well, actually, I'll go ahead and just show you real quick. Okay, when drawing a line, it can be very hard to draw a straight line, depending on which input method you're in. If you hold the Shift key down, it's going to give you a nice straight line in all four directions. Okay? If you hold the Control key down, it's going to give you a 45-degree line in all four directions. And again, to undo the last action performed, you can hold down the Control and tap the Z as in zebra key, or you can just hit the Escape key, which is my favorite. That's pretty much it for the hotkeys. Let's see. I believe in your Vulkan Docs folder on your desktop, you should have a document that has all the hotkeys in it, so you might want to look there. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with parts 2, navigating around. Now, the first thing that I want to talk about, you have 3 different input methods: relative, absolute, and polar. All day yesterday and today, I've only worked in relative. Okay? I want you guys to start thinking about this now. Anytime you open up the program, there are a couple of things that you always need to check, and you always need to be aware of what is selected at all times, because depending on what's selected, it's going to make your program act very differently. I want you to start being aware of which input method, relative, absolute, or polar, is selected. I also want you to make sure which object usage icon is selected. Again, like I said yesterday, if you do not have the optional scribe tip for your plasma cutter, then you will always use the cut object. And finally, the third thing, you need to be aware of which snap icon you're in. Because, like I said, depending on which of those 3 you're in, it's going to make the program act very differently. So, let's go ahead, and the first thing that I want to talk about are our snap icons. First, we have grid snap. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to zoom in. I've got my line tool selected, and I'm just going to pick out 4 grid points. Got these 4 right here, and I'm going to take my cursor and I'm going to try to go in the very center of these 4. I'm going to click with my mouse, and then as I start moving my pointer away, as you can see, the line has jumped and snapped to the closest available grid point, which in this case happens to be the lower right grid point. Now, as I move my pointer along the screen, you can see the end of my line is somewhat following my pointer, but it's not following it very precisely. What it's doing, it's jumping and snapping to the closest available grid point to the end of my pointer. Whenever the end of the line is where I want it, all I need to do is click with my mouse to place it. Okay, so that's basically it for grid snap. It's going to snap to the closest available grid point to your pointer. Okay, let's jump to the other end of the scale, and we're going to look at free pick. Okay, again, I'm going to select 4 grid points, and I know they're kind of hard to see, but there's these 4 grid points right here. Again, I'm going to try to go in the very center of them. I'm going to click with my pointer, I'm going to click with my mouse, and then as I start moving my pointer away, as you can see, the line started exactly where I selected. It did not jump and snap to a grid point because I'm in free pick. And now as I move my pointer, the end of the line is following my pointer very precisely. Whenever you get the line to where you like it, just click to place your line. And that's it for free pick. It's going to place a line, arc, or circle wherever you select. Okay, so let's go back and look at object snap. Object snap is going to snap to the closest available endpoint of an object. Okay, so on our screen right now we have 2 objects. We have 2 lines. You don't have to get at the very end of the line. You don't have to get right up on it. Just get kind of close. As you see, my pointer, it's probably maybe 2 inches away. I'm going to click with my mouse, and what the line has done, it's jumped and snapped to the closest available endpoint. Okay, so again, you don't have to get right up on it. Just get kind of close, and it's going to jump and snap to it. Next, we have marker snap. Now, in order to use Marker Snap, of course, you're going to have some markers. So we're going to go to our marker menu. I'm going to select Mark Object. I'll just leave it at the default division of 2. I'll say OK, and then I'm just going to I'm going to click all 4 lines here. I will switch to Marker Snap. I need to make sure that I have my line tool selected. And just like Grid Snap and Object Snap, it's going to snap to the closest available marker. You don't have to get right up on it, just get kind of close, and it's going to jump and snap to it. Okay? And our last snap icon is Intersection Snap. It's going to do just what it says. It's going to snap to the closest available intersection. All I have to do, just get kind of close, and it's going to snap to it. Okay, let's talk about a couple of things here that I have not gone over yet. I'm going to go to View. I'm going to select Options. And in our Options menu, under Display, we have Set Grid Size. Right now, my grid size is set to 1. That's telling me each grid point is 1 inch apart. We can change that. Let's change it to 1/4 inch. Or, I mean, you can go smaller. We can change it to 1/8 of an inch. I'll close out of here. As you can see, there's a lot more grid points out there. We'll go back to View, Options. If you need them set to every 6 inches, just type in 6. We'll hit Enter, close out of our Options window. And as you can see, there are now there's very few grid points out there. But if we were to draw a line, I'm going to select my line tool. I'm going to switch to Grid Snap. I'm going to draw from one grid point to another. I can then go to Data, Object, select my line, and as you can see, it's telling me that the length is 6 inches. Let's go back. I'm going to reset this to 1 inch. We also have, and I will eventually go over all of these options. We also have Display Border and Display Grid. I'm going to go ahead and check Display Border. And as you can see, it's putting a border around our drawing area. Okay? I myself don't really like the border too much, so I always have that unchecked. I'm also going to uncheck Display Grid. As you can see, there are no... actually, let me reword that. You are not able to see the grid points anymore. Okay? Just because you can't see the grid points doesn't mean that they're not there. Okay? Right now here, let me zoom in a little bit so we can see that it's still jumping to the grid points. But I'm in Grid Snap. I've got my line tool selected. And as you can see, it's still jumping and snapping to the closest available grid point. Okay? So again, if you go into Options and you uncheck Display Grid, it's still, the grid points are always there, they're just not visible right now. I'm going to go ahead and recheck that. And the last thing that I want to talk about on this screen for now is our Shape Match Tolerance. Right now it's set to 5, which is telling me that, well here, actually let me draw a rectangle out here. Okay, now I've got my my grid point set for every 1 inch. So if I were to count, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This right here, if I go beyond this point right here, I'm going to switch to Object Snap. Now I told you all you need to do is get kind of close to snap to an object. Okay? Well, because my intersection tolerance is set to 5 inches, that's telling me I have to be at least 5 inches away. If I go beyond 5 inches, I'm clicking right now. I can click all day long and nothing's going to happen until I get within 5 inches. Okay? Once I'm within 5 inches, it's going to jump and snap to either an object, a marker, an intersection, or a grid point. So that is actually what controls your snap icons. How far you have to be, the shape match tolerance. So if I didn't like that 5 inches, if that was too much, I can set it to 1 inch. Again, I'm outside, I'm beyond 1 inch, I can click all day long, but until I get within 1 inch, I'm not going to be able to snap to anything. Once I get within that 1 inch that I've set, I'll be able to snap to any grid point, marker, intersection, or object. Okay, let's go ahead and change that back to 5 inches though. Okay, next let's look at the Colors tab. If you draw a line and you're not sure about if it's a different color other than black, if you're not sure what that color means, you can always go to View, Options, and click on the Colors tab. Right now, we're working with regular shapes. Okay, so I've got a black line over here, and I've got an orange line over here. The black line is a standard or a construction line. The orange line is a temporary line. It's temporary because I haven't placed it yet. If I were to select the scribe tool and draw a line, I don't know if you can really tell, but that's a purple color. Let's go back to the Color tab, and that purple color is telling me that it's a scribe. Well, if, like I said, it's kind of hard to see, to distinguish between that purple and the black, so you might want to change the color. All you need to do is click on the color box, and let's say we want to change it to green. I'll click OK. As you can see, it's green now. We can then close out, and now on my screen, my line has turned green. Okay? Let's go ahead and clear the drawing. And now we are going to talk about the different input methods. One other thing that I did fail to mention, the snap icons are always used with your mouse. Okay? The different input methods, relative, absolute, and polar, are intended to be used with the keyboard. Now, all day yesterday, I worked in relative. Relative is by far the easiest input method that we have. Relative is relative to where you're at right now. Now, what I mean by that, let me draw a line. I'm going to come out here, and I'm just going to click on a grid point. And all I have to do to enter relative coordinates is start typing away. But where am I at? I am at this grid point right here. So if I want to draw a 10-inch line, all I need to do is type 10 on my keyboard. As you see, it's showing up on my x-axis. I'll hit enter, enter again, and it draws a 10-inch long line. Now, as you can see, that's a green line, and we know that we've changed our scribe to green. So again, you always want to be aware of what is selected. We need to change that to cut object. Okay, again, I will draw a 10-inch line, type 10 on my X. Okay, now, where am I at? I am at the end of this line. I still have my line tool selected. At the bottom it's telling me select start point of line. Well, to select the start point of the line, I need to tell it where I'm at, which is 0 on my X, 0 on my Y. Okay, as you can see, it's jumped down and it's snapped to the end of the previous line. Now, if I want to go 10 inches up, I'll type 0 on my x-axis and 10 on my y. Let's get this a little more into focus. Okay, so now I am here. Okay, so again, I need to tell it the start of my line, which is 0 on my x, 0 on my y. Now, to go to the left, I need to type negative 10 on my x, 0 on my y. I'll give it my start point, which is 0, 0. Oh, went a little too quick for me. And to go down, I want to go 0 on my x and negative 10 on my y. If I want to go diagonal, let's give it our start point. I want to go 10 inches on my x and 10 inches on my y. Okay, so again, if you want to draw a line while in relative going to the right, you're going to enter a positive x value. If you want to go to the left, you'll enter a negative x value. If you want to go up, you'll enter a positive y value. And if you want to go down, you'll enter a negative y value. Let's focus in on a different area here. And I'm going to draw the same line, or I'm sorry, the same square using a polyline. Give it my start point. I want to go 10 on my x. Okay. Now, notice I don't have to give it a start point because I'm using the polyline. So I'm going to go 0 on my x, 10 on my y. I want to go negative 10 on my y. And finally, I want to go negative 10 on my x. I think I said negative 10 on my y. And finally, I want to go negative 10 on my y. To go diagonal, again, just type 10 on your x, 10 on your y. So, using different tools in the program, as you see, I just did half the steps because I selected a different tool. So you might want to experiment with some of the tools there. Okay, that is relative. Relative is relative to where you're at right now. Relative, again, is by far the easiest input method we have. Let's go to the next input method, which is polar. Polar is the hardest input method that we have. But someday somebody might come in with some drawings that have absolute coordinates, and it would be absolutely necessary that you could enter those coordinates, so that's why we've included it in the program. Now, I do have a drawing here. Give me just a second. I made a little drawing that kind of shows you absolute coordinates. Okay, can everybody see this? Okay. With absolute, 0, 0 is always going to be in the lower left-hand corner. Like I was telling you with relative, relative is relative to where you're at right now. So when I was starting my line, I would type 0 on my x and 0 on my y because that's where I was at that point. But with absolute, 0, 0 is always going to be in the lower left-hand corner, and each grid point has a specific coordinate. As you can see, this one that my pointer is on right now is 7 on my y and 14 on my x. And because each grid point has a specific coordinate, that's why absolute is so hard to use, because you have to know exactly where you want the start and the end point of each line, or the exact coordinate for each circle or arc. Okay, so let's see. Let me reshare my program. Okay, so let's draw. Let's just draw a 5 by 5 square using absolute coordinates. Now, I am going to use the polyline because it's going to be a lot quicker to use the polyline than it would be for me to use the regular line, as we saw with relative. So I've got my polyline selected, and all you need to do is start typing your coordinates. I want to start my square on, not 22, 2 on my x, 2 on my y. Okay? As you can see here, 0, 0, so we can count 1, 2 on my x, 1, 2 on my y, and that's exactly where it started. I then want to go to 2, 7. I'm then going to go to 7, 7. I'll then go to 7, 2. And then finally I'll end back up at 2x and 2y. If I want to draw a diagonal line, I have to enter the specific coordinate, which is 7 on my x and 7 on my y. Okay? Now, let me click my Done button here. And I'm going to draw a rectangle in FreePick. As you can see, I'm not on a grid point. Now, let's go to Data, Object, and select the line. Another reason why absolute is so hard is because we don't just give you the start and the end point in whole numbers. As you can see, this goes to 1/1000th of an inch. Okay? Now, when you select Data, Object, and you click on a line, arc, or a circle, we're going to give you a start and an end point. That start and end point is always going to be in absolute coordinates, no matter what. It doesn't matter if you're in relative or if you're in polar. It's always going to give you an absolute coordinate because it is the most precise input method that we have. Okay? Okay, well let's go on to polar input. Okay? Polar is probably the easiest input method we have because with polar, all you need to do is specify a distance and an angle. Again, someday somebody might come in with a drawing and there might be a line on there that just has an angle. Doesn't have a length, it just has an angle. Well, it'd be necessary for you to enter that with polar. So let's get our trusty polyline here. Okay, so I've got a polyline. I'm going to hold down my Shift key and so I can get a nice straight line. And so I've got this line right here, but let's say from this line, I know that I need to draw another line that's 8 inches at 23 degrees. Okay? Well, since I'm in polar, all I need to do is type 8. And now, as you can see in this data entry box, instead of an X and a Y field, I now have a distance and an angle. So I've entered 8 for my distance. My angle is going to be 23 degrees. I'll say OK to this. I can click my Done button. I'll go to Data, Object, select my line. Again, the start and the end point are in absolute, even though I'm in polar input. And then it's telling me that the length, well, that's pretty close to 8. I don't know why it's not exactly 8. And that's pretty close to 23 degrees, but it's not exactly 23 degrees. Let me do that again, because that is very odd. Eight inches at 23 degrees. Data, Object. Okay. Usually this is, it gets it really exact I'm going to have to talk to the programmers and see exactly what's going on here. But as you can see, that's really close enough to 8 inches, and that's really 23.5 degrees. But I do need to talk to the programmers because usually it's dead on every time. So not sure what's up with that. Okay, that is it for the different input methods. Does anybody have any questions? At that point, I was using FreePick. But it doesn't matter which snap icon you're in. You can use any of the 5 snap icons with any of the 3 input methods. Okay? But I'm sorry, go ahead. Well, it would snap to a grid point, but well, it still should have. No matter what input, or I'm sorry, no matter what snap icon I'm in, it still should give me. I mean, we can try it right now. Let's see, I'm still in there, 23 degrees. Data object. Well, now that did work, but I mean, it still shouldn't. That really shouldn't play a role in it. You know, no matter which snap icon I'm in, if I tell it I want an 8-inch long line at 23 degrees, whether I'm in grid snap, object snap, marker snap, intersection snap, or FreePick, it should always give me an 8-inch long line at 23 degrees. And I'm sorry, even though I'm in grid snap right now, as you see, at the end of my line, it's not on a grid point. We can zoom in here. So, it didn't snap on a grid point. It started on a grid point down here, but it didn't actually end on a grid point. Okay? Okay. Yes. Enhance, so you can see them better? No. If the reason why they keep them so small, if they get any larger, they can visually interfere with your drawing. Maybe, I don't know exactly how large they are, but maybe I can talk to the programmers and, just have an option. Because it's kind of hard for me to see, too. I mean, I wear glasses, and, sometimes it kind of strains my eyes. So Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, let me talk to the programmers and see if there's anything they can do. Because I have had that question before, and the good thing about it is, the more people that ask me, the greater the chance that it's going to be added to the program. So I've got a software login on it, and I will just add you to that software log. It's more ammo for me. Okay, let's go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Is that all the questions so far? Okay. Okay, let's go ahead and finish up the rest of the icons on the toolbar here. This icon right here is Set Reference Point. It looks a lot like a snap icon, but it's not. What it does, you draw a rectangle out here. And actually, I'm just going to drag this to where it's not on a grid point so you guys know that I'm not lying. Now, let's say, because everything in this world's not perfect, everything can't fall on a grid point. Let's say from this corner I need to place a hole 1 inch over and 1 inch up. Now, if it was a perfect world, then I just put it on a grid point and go about my day. But let's say I'm not on a grid point. Or maybe I need to place it, 1 1/8 inch by 2.5 inches from that corner. I'll select circle. I'll type in my dimensions, and then I'm going to hit the set reference point. I'm going to switch to Object Snap, and then I'm going to click on this corner, and at the bottom it says select center point of circle. Well, it really wants to know the offset. So on my x-axis, I'm going to type in 1 1/8 inch. Oh, and as you can see, I'm still in polar. Like I said, you always want to be aware of which input method and which snap icon you're in, because it's going to make it act very differently. So let me cancel out of this real quick. I'm going to switch to relative. And so from this corner, I want to go 1 1/8 inch by, I think I said 2.5 inches? 2.5 inches on my y-axis. Okay, so from this corner, it went over 1 1/8 and up 2.5 inches. If I want to place it from the next corner, you always need to hit the set reference point button before you actually click the corner. So I'm going to select this corner. Again, I'm going to type 1 1/8 inch, but this time on my y-axis, I'm going to type negative 2.5 inches. Okay? If you do not hit the set reference point, if you forget and you just click on the corner, it's going to place the hole on your corner. Okay? So from this point, we could hit the move button. I want to move this negative 1 1/8 by negative 2.5 inches. Okay? So that is the set reference point. It will allow you to place an object from a grid point, from the end of an object, from a marker, from an intersection, or just any point out there. And it uses all three input methods, but it'd probably be easiest to use relative. Okay. Now, that being said, the set reference point, I do not want you to get that confused with another thing. If you're going through the main menu and you get to group, there is set group reference. This is very different. Let me show you what this does. Okay, now here's something. I wasn't paying attention to which snap icon I'm in. I'm in Object Snap. I just entered a 4x4 square. I'm clicking, but nothing's happening. Okay, if I were to switch to, because there's not an object to snap to, if I were to switch to marker snap, again, I can click all day, nothing's going to happen because there's not a marker. Same thing with intersection. So again, you always need to be aware of which input method, which snap icon, and which object usage icon is selected. When you first start out in the parts program, the only snap icons that you can use are grid snap and free pick. Okay? So I'm going to switch back to grid snap. I'm going to place my square, and then I'm going to go over to rotate. Okay? As you can see, when I'm rotating this, it's rotating it on the center point. Now, because this is a group, the program doesn't see this as 4 independent lines. It sees it as one group. What it's actually doing, it's rotating this group based off of the group reference point. Okay? So when we go to group and click set group reference, and then click on our group, it's going to show you our current group reference point. Okay? We can change it. I'm going to select the Object Snap, and I'm going to click on the bottom corner here. Now when I go to rotate it, instead of rotating it based off of the center point, it's going to rotate it based off of the new group reference point that I set, or the bottom corner. Okay? Now, what can you do with that? Let me just delete this. I'm going to place 2 rectangles. Okay? Let's say that I want to move this rectangle to this corner. I I can click move, I'll click the rectangle, and then I will click the corner. But because the group reference point is set for the center, it moves the center of the rectangle on our right, it moves the center of that to the corner. So what we can do, we can go to set group reference, and we're going to change our group reference to the lower left corner. So now when I say I want to move this rectangle to this corner, it moves the lower left corner to the upper right corner. Okay? Let's see. Let's look at our zoom in. I'm going to clear the drawing, and actually first I'm going to go to view, and I'm going to go to set size. And as you can see, our drawing size is 20 by 20. That is the default drawing size. I'm going to change that to 100 by 100. And I'm going to place some really small holes. I'll switch to free pick. I'm going to just place a bunch of really small holes in the upper left corner. Okay. Now let's imagine that we've got a lot more stuff on our drawing area, but there's these holes in the upper left-hand corner that we'd really like to see. Well, on your keyboard, as I told you earlier, you can just tap the Z key, draw a bounding box, and it's going to zoom in to whatever area you select. Okay. I'm going to hit the full screen. That's going to go back to the default view. Tapping the Z key is just like hitting the magnify button. The magnify button also allows you to draw a bounding box, and it will zoom in to that area. Now, another thing that you can do with your mouse, a lot of the I guess it would be mice. A lot of the mice that they sell today have a scroll wheel in between the left and the right. The left and the right mouse button. What I'm doing, I'm placing my finger on the scroll wheel and I'm pulling it towards myself, and that's allowing me to zoom out. If I place my finger on the wheel and push away from myself, it's going to zoom in. Now, not only is that scroll wheel a wheel, but it's also a button. A lot of people don't know that. And I got a new mouse the other day, so this doesn't work with this mouse anymore, but if you double click, and actually I guess it really just kind of depends. You're going to have to play around with your mouse and find out what exactly it does. But if you double click, it's just like going to full screen. Oh, I'm sorry, I hit the wrong button. It's just like going to full screen. Okay? With the scroll wheel that I currently have, let me zoom in again. With the scroll wheel that I currently have, you can tilt the wheel to the left or to the right, and that's going to allow me to pan to the left or pan to the right. And all I'm doing, like I said, I'm taking that scroll wheel and I'm tilting it right now to the left. It's going to pan to the left. I'll tilt it to the right, and it pans to the right. Another thing that you could possibly do, just kind of depends on your mouse, you can hold down the scroll wheel, and then as you move your mouse around on your desktop, which it's not doing it on mine, but it will also allow you to pan in any direction. Okay? Now, if you don't have one of the new fancy mice, on your keyboard, there are at least 4 directional keys, left, right, up, and down. What I'm going to do, I'm going to tap the left key. Oh, actually, I'm already panned all the way to the left, so let me tap the right. It's going to allow me to pan to the right. If I tap the left key, it will pan back to the left. I'll tap the down key, I pan down. Or if I tap the up key, it's going to pan up. Okay? And the last button that I want to talk about is auto size. When I select auto size, it's going to ask me for a border. I'm just going to leave it blank. I'm going to say OK. And what it's doing, okay, now before, if we look in the lower left corner, it tells me my drawing size. It's 28.761 by 9.186. If you remember, I had changed that just a minute ago to 100 by 100. So what this is actually doing, it's taking everything on your drawing area, every object, and it's bringing it to full screen. Okay, so let me zoom out a little bit. So if I had a little line down here, you know, that I could barely see. Like if we're zoomed out right like this, you can barely see this line right here. I'll go to auto size, I'll say OK, and you know, all I see are these circles up here. But for some reason, because of that little line, it's not bringing all those circles into full screen. Now, I've had a lot of people call me about this because they'll get a DXF file that, you know, there's just like a little itty-bitty, I mean, you know, like an eighth of an inch or even smaller. There'll be some little small minuscule line or circle that they can't see, and then when they try to cut path, the program goes haywire because that little line's throwing it off. So this is kind of, you know, you can use it to bring everything to full screen, or you can also use it as a tool to see if there is something out there that you can't see, or that at least is hard to see. Okay, by just leaving the border at 0. So what I would do at this point, I would zoom into this area, and sometimes you have to zoom in a lot, and then all you have to do is delete that little line, go back to auto size, leave the border at 0, and it's going to bring everything to full screen. Now, if you wanted a border around it to have a little room to work, let's put a 10-inch border. I'll say OK. And now, the furthest object to the left, to the end of the drawing area, there is a 10-inch border. You know? Actually, there's a 10-inch border around everything. To the left, to the right, top, and the bottom. Okay, that is it for me today, guys.